Welcome to UK Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host, Yukai Kechidori.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special episode. Listen, if you missed the last episode we had last week, you definitely want to go catch it up because my guest really covered what I consider some of the important principles that will define your success during our time right now. So you want to go check that out, but not now, because right now I've got an outstanding guest with me, somebody that is doing it, somebody is helping other business owners like you and I really do very well. Let me ask you a question. Do you really want to make an impact in your environment on purpose, not accidentally, not, throw things around there and pray that things are going to work out? Or you really want to do this on purpose? Well, if you are like me, you're in for a treat because my guest, Thomas, has got something unique, something that is working for his clients and for himself that he wants to share with us. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Yukai.
Incredible. And Dennis, it's so good to see you again, man. How are you?
I'm very well, Yukai. It's so much fun to be back together again with you. And we've got this awesome guest as well. So let's over to you, Thomas.
Indeed. Now, Thomas, I know you've got a three-step process or three things that you truly believe that are key to making this real impact. Do share with us just one of those before we get to know who you are.
Sure. So for me, one of the biggest things that I work on with my clients is helping them slow down so that they can really start to recognize what is most important for them.
Right.
If you don't slow down enough because your nose is against the grindstone and you're just moving from one thing to the next, you're not really certain that you're going to be operating from a place that is really aligned with your core values. So who are you? Who do you want to be in this earth walk?
Absolutely. And I'm hoping we are going to explore that very soon after a proper introduction here. But, I absolutely agree with you. Because of the world we live in, it appears that everything is speeding. And if you can slow down and you can see things clearly, I really, really love that. One of the things I love about you is you've not always been in what you're doing. You used to be a consultant for some corporate American companies. And all of a sudden things changed about 8 years ago. Give us a bit of a background to this.
Sure. So I always was passionate about helping people grow and transform. And yet, because of the messages I received growing up, and in my family, I felt the need to follow something more traditional, more technically challenging. And so I ended up spending a lot of time in energy efficiency, renewable energy, climate change. And while I loved that work and I found it meaningful, I also was finding myself instinctively finding those points to insert myself as a coach to help people get comfortable with change. And 8 years ago, as you referenced, I had a near fatal bicycle accident. And when I had a traumatic brain injury, it took me roughly 2.5 years to trust my brain again because I didn't know if it was going to operate at the same level. My mom is worked a lot in rehab settings as an occupational therapist. And so I knew that I may not gain everything back. And as I was recovering, it just became clear to me, why am I spending my life energy trying to fit into somebody else's box?
Yeah.
Why am I forcing myself to be that round peg in a square hole? It's not comfortable. It's not who I am. And it's not really how I want to spend the rest of my time on this planet, however long that is. And so I as my brain became more trustworthy, I really started to think about what it was that I was going to be spending my time on. And that's when I moved towards coaching full time.
Yeah. And you also had a precious friend of yours, who transitioned in a very peaceful way and also had made a huge impact in her community, which inspired you. Would love to hear about that story.
Yes. So about the time I was regaining confidence in my brain, my wife and I were part of a group of friends who held space for a dear friend of ours who was passing from pancreatic cancer. And it was just a phenomenal experience to be in community holding space for someone who was leaving this realm. And it was just incredible to reflect on how richly she lived. And she did that because she shared all of her gifts fully. And that was also what I realized was missing from me trying to squeeze myself into somebody else's box. And I'm sure many of our listeners, Bill, if you're out there, can identify with that. It's like, what are we crimping of our essential self and preventing that from being seen, from being shared? And so what is that preventing from occurring? So our friend lived richly by sharing all of her gifts. She had community. She died with grace. And especially where I was in my recovery at that time, that's what I want to have for the rest of my life. Yeah. How can I build that? How can I move towards that? And so she really inspired me to step forth and say, coaching is really where I want to spend my life energy. Yeah. And I am going to follow that path because here's where I can share all of my gifts authentically, freely, fully.
Yeah. I was on your website seeing some of the things that you're doing right now, for those listening. And one thing that sort of struck me is how you are truly making an impact because of that experience, because of the journey that you went on. And to me, it speaks on really the fact that the moment you start to live life on purpose and stop living for somebody else, that's when you begin to really make that impact. And you'll be doing that on purpose. And a lot of people will pay it back by praises, or you literally see transformation in other people's lives. So I would love to really, at this point, if you don't mind, us going into talking about the principles you've discovered that have allowed you to live life on purpose. And of course, you touched on the first one earlier on, rediscovering what's important to you truly. How do you go about doing this?
So for me, it's really, well, it depends on the client, but there's a couple of ways that can be, you can move towards this. So one way is just to send somebody home after a coaching session and say, what are your core values? Just like you might for an organization. Like if you're putting together a business, what are the core values of the business? Because those are how you're showing up in the world. Yeah. And when you start to identify that, then you can start to say, these are the three, and I usually try to keep it to three because otherwise it gets a little complex. And like, it's not just identifying, I want to embody integrity, or I want to embody authenticity. It's like, tell me what it means. So give me a definition of how it shows up. And then that way you can really be clear. It's like, this is my definition, because Dennis might have a different definition of integrity or authenticity. Not that it's wrong or bad. It's just, it's different than mine. So I want to be really clear that when somebody else reads it, especially if I'm bringing on somebody else, that they could understand that, right? Just as you might in an organization. The other way too is, and I'm trained in somatic coaching as well, is, and so from that philosophy, where we are what we practice, right? You learn how to walk, you learn how to talk, read, write. These are all things we learn through the body. Just remember the first time you got behind a car steering wheel and had to learn, it's like, oh, this is the clutch, this is the gear shift, this is the blinkers, and it was really hard, but then it becomes embodied. And so what are you practicing on a regular basis? And so you can set yourself a commitment statement. And this is basically a promise to yourself for how you're going to show up in the future. And you're going to know that you achieved that commitment. So it might be, for example, I make a commitment to connecting more deeply with my authentic self so that I might live a more grounded, spacious life. And for some listening, that might feel very woo-woo or very vague. But if you start to say, well, identify specifically, well, what's going to be different if you achieve that? What's going to make that, achieving that make possible? What will other people say about you? Right? How are you showing up? How are you letting others in? What are you practicing? And that's going to give you more clarity on what's important to you, and also what your impact is and how you want to shape that.
You know what? I have to share this with you. I didn't intend to share this. I remember when I did this exercise with a gentleman called Mike Anastasi, in 2012. It wasn't easy to identify what my core values were. And we did that over a weekend. It was, an internet marketing seminar, but he changed it into some kind of a personal development. I will never forget that. But it was one of the biggest one of the steps that truly yielded biggest move in me becoming who I am today. So, taking time to identify those core values. Bill, if you're listening, this truly is that building block you need to put in place. Probably you've done that already. Probably you have your core values, but it won't hurt anybody by revisiting them and reestablishing them. Are these still the core values that makes you happy? I'm glad you touched on that. Maybe Dennis, you've got something else to follow up on that.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, it sounds to me like you're giving someone a safe space to do some exploration. You're slowing it down a little bit for them and just going, hey, let's just stop a little bit. And it's if we go back to your earlier experience, it sounds like because of your accident, you actually had that space where you had to stop, and you were given that chance to think through and ask yourself, am I going towards the person I want to be? Am I becoming the person I want to be? And that seems to be very much bound up in the process that you're helping clients with.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go, Bill. Here's what you can do right now. I know you're doing this already. Mark a date in your calendar, if you can, where you're going to look at your core values. I know big life is busy right now. Maybe it isn't. But the thing that you need to do is really mark it down and say, this day, maybe this month, and whenever you are going to follow through. Remember what Tony Robbins says, never leave a place of discovery without scheduling an action plan, what you're going to do. I truly believe this is important. I know because of our time, we want to jump on to the next goal here. Some of the things that you've discovered here, Thomas, over the years that could help people. It is really about connecting with yourself. Help us understand this part.
Well, to your point, scheduling that time, Yukai, is really powerful because we need to give ourselves permission not to jump onto the next goal. But it's also important to sit with the time that it takes to get out of the head, because in our society, we grow up and we stay in the head. And so reconnecting to the heart and the body and really having access to all of the resources around us to really know what's speaking. I was forced, because of my accident and the forced quieting of my mind, to listen for other resources. And that was scary because I didn't know how much of my mind would come back. And yet it doesn't have to be that dramatic or traumatic a process for anybody, but just taking that time for space can be really powerful. And then if you choose your 3 core values, it's okay to come back and change them. Like if that's not the right word, find the right word, because it really needs to resonate with your core, with your spirit. And then you can start to develop something. One of the things what I work on is with embodiment. So it's around the embodiment of that beingness of that particular core value, for example. So if authenticity is one of your core values, how are you embodying that? And what does that do for you in terms of your interactions with others? How do people experience that? And what is happening?
Yeah, incredible. Absolutely incredible. A follow-up question really is, say a business owner today wants to connect with themselves, really get to that place where they connect with their values tomorrow, instant. Describe perhaps a process that they can do that. I'm happy to share mine, but I'd love to hear your perspective, what is working for you and maybe what's working for your clients as well.
So with me, one of the things that I do is I first take my clients at the beginning of every session. We go through a centering exercise.
Yeah.
And so centering is different from just meditation or mindfulness. It's also different than grounding. Yeah. Centering is at the nexus of being and action, because we really want, going back to like these core values and embodying them, there needs to be a congruence between your words and your actions.
Yeah.
And so it's how do you ground, or how do you center? How do you find that? And so giving yourself some space to feel, to get out of your thinking self. And so it could be something as simple as just pulling out a pen and paper and just letting yourself draw a picture, right? Yeah. Can you access different sides of yourself? And then from there, when you feel calmer, when you feel there's a more spacious sense of time, then start to inquire, what are my core values? What am I trying to, or what is the yearning that wants to emerge from me today?
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely amazing. Thanks for sharing that. Here's what I do, ladies and gentlemen. Many of you have heard me talk about this. It's one of my core values, one of my core practices, is every single morning before I get out of bed or whatever, I have a saying that says, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will be glad and rejoice in it. I say that literally every single day. And then I've got that quiet time that I have where I'm grateful for the moment. I always start with the grateful. I'm grateful that I am alive today. I'm grateful that I have myself, a lot of things that I have that I did not work for. Really start by looking at everything that I'm grateful. The amazing thing that happens is I will be doing that. I feel calmer. I feel there is no need for rush. There is just me and present. And while I'm in that state of gratitude, I begin to think of the things I am working on, the things I want to see happening in my own life, the things that I'm hoping that today I'll be able to accomplish. Again, this may sound woo, but while my eyes are closed, I begin to see that being completed. I map it out because I've been doing it for so long. It now comes to me naturally because it's now part of my habit. I can see what needs to happen so that when I get to face my day, it's happening as I've already seen it happening earlier on. It's a powerful exercise that I do. I know I'm simplifying it, but it doesn't take me long, but that's how I start my day. Taking a seat, sometimes in the seat I'm using right now, take that deep breath, begin to be very grateful for the moment, begin to appreciate what I already have rather than to worry about what I want or what I don't have, and then move away. And by doing so, I connect with myself. I really become who I want to be, and I think about my values. Dennis, maybe you've got some, some practice that helps you. Would you share?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Yuko. That's very beautiful. I think you've touched on a couple of really interesting things, which is slowing down. We don't make good decisions when we're rushed. Our brain rushes and we make good decisions. That's fight or flight, and that's okay if you're running from something that's got more legs and teeth and hair than you have. But actually, for all the other stuff we need to do in life, that kind of instant response isn't normally helpful. So we need to slow it down. We need to focus on core values, and we need to focus on alignment. And I think, Thomas, you had that experience yourself where you were forced to stop, but Would you be able to share with us, some of the symptoms that some of your clients have when they come to you? So how they can recognize when they're not in harmony, when they're not in alignment, and how that manifests in their life?
Sure. And Yukai, I really appreciate you bringing in the gratitude practice, and because not everybody has a spiritual practice or a gratitude practice. And so for those who don't, definitely start that. The clients that come to me typically are those are experiencing something that something feels just out of reach.
Yeah.
They've been trying to do something. Maybe they've tried other methods. They've been trying to do it on their own, and it's still out of reach, and they're not sure why. And it's maybe because they haven't taken they haven't reflected on or examined what they're practicing and how that might be hindering them achieving what feels out of reach at the moment. Or if things feel hard, it's like they feel like they're spinning their wheels and they're not sure why.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if what Thomas is talking about sounds like you, I want to encourage you to reach out to Thomas. He may be able to help you there rediscover your inner power and really lead from a place of strength, a place where you will be making real impact. We're coming toward the end of our time here together. There's so much to talk about, but I want Thomas here to share with everybody maybe one or two case studies of people you have helped over the last few years that struggle with the topic we are talking about and have come out good on the other side.
Sure. So I'll share first a client that I worked with. He came to me just at the beginning of the pandemic, so obviously feeling all of the compression of kids at home, working from home, and trying to make sense of that all. And he came to me just about to turn 41 and really feeling like he was on the runway to repeat what happened to his father, which was suffering a near fatal stroke at 55. And he didn't want that. And he was not sure what to do about it. So in our roughly 11 months of working together, we discovered that there were these messages that he was living by that came from when he was a kid, that came from the family situations that he grew up in. And they weren't his stories. They were imposed upon him. And when he started to slow down and unpack and start to recognize how his body was actually telling him, oh, this is a danger signal, or this is when you're going to start to panic, or what have you, he could prevent those symptoms from rising because he could slow down, he could take a breath, he could ground, he could be grateful for what he had. And so this is someone who was president and co-owner of a small environmental services consulting firm. He still is. And by the end of our work together, he was considering buying out his business partner so that he could really create a culture that would help the entire company and the people flourish and thereby do better. He was able to delegate more of his work, so he didn't feel like he had to do everything.
Great.
He was more present for his young kids, sort of in the 10 to 13 year age range. And he had a much happier relationship with his wife. Yeah. So that is the power that can happen, with just slowing down and becoming more aware of what's important to you and also reconnecting to yourself.
Outstanding. Absolutely incredible. Thanks for sharing that story. I know a lot of people will, including myself, I absolutely love that. But, hearing other people's story makes you believe that it's happening for them, it would happen for you. On that note, for those who want to carry on learning with you, where can they find you?
Sure. So my website is regenerate.coach. You can also find me on Medium. It's tlrosenberg.medium.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. So, incredible. Yes.
And we'll make sure that we put your website here below this recording so that people can access that. Dennis, any final questions for Thomas here before we wrap up?
Well, it's been so interesting listening to you around that. I came across something where you said about walking the edges of the uncomfortable. And I just have to ask you to tease that out a little bit more for our listeners.
Sure. So our growth doesn't occur in our comfort zone.
Right.
And so we have to step out of that comfort zone into a learning zone. And that's often through a thicket of fear. And so we have to walk along that unknown edge to see what becomes possible, because we've been practicing a certain way of being, a certain way of seeing the world, and walking that line, we're like, oh, wait, if I don't make that assumption, look what's possible.
Yeah.
And so then there's this incredible opportunity for discovery, even though it might actually be a little scary in a good way.
Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. Bump up against the edges of your beliefs and see what's possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also just listening to what the stories are that you're living your life by. Do they still serve you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my dear friend, Thomas Rosenberg, all the way from California, sharing with you what is working right now for a lot of people who wants to make a real impact in their surrounding. If there is one thing that we all as human beings want to do is leave a mark on planet Earth. It doesn't matter where you are, there is this desire to make a difference. We may not all do that, but the desire is there. And today you've been discovering how you can do that on purpose. And if you want to find out more about what we've been talking about, reach out to Thomas Rosenberg, and there's a website below this recording that you can access. And you know what? Don't do this alone. Reach out to somebody to help you. Thomas, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your truth with our audience today.
Thank you, Yukai and Dennis.
Thank you.
Incredible. And Dennis, once again, thank you. We can't wait for you, Dennis, to be hosting another show with us here on the show. It's quite exciting time for us all, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Yukai.
Indeed. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, remember, live well, live with passion. Know that the best is truly, truly yet to come. And again, if you've got any question, we are here to support you. Reach out to the team and we will make it happen for you. Goodbye for now.
Thank you for listening to Yukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yukaibusinessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.